Hi everyone, this is Stephanie from CS Planners, and I'm here today with my co-host Chelsea. Today we have Alicia to talk with us.
Yes.
Hi, Alicia. So I want to do a little quick intro for you because I love what you're going to be talking about today. So you focus on starting a podcast. So let's get into that. What do you need to start something like that?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot more to it than people realize. You'll see a lot of the courses out there that are like launch in 48 hours or launch in 2 weeks. And if you already have an established audience and it's massive, then sure. You have a team to help you do it, then sure. But my clients, we don't launch anything in less than 2 months. And that is to build that momentum, to get their marketing going, to get people excited about it. That way, when they launch, there are people lined up at the door, quote unquote, ready to listen and excited to hear what they have to talk about. So there's a lot more that goes into it than actually just like record some stuff and throw it up on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, so I imagine too, like once you have that momentum, once you have that out there, the more plays allows you to grow even faster. Is that correct?
Yes. And it also helps you not feel like you want to stop. And that's the thing that happens with a lot of podcasts is they'll start and they won't see any growth. They won't see any listens or just their mom listens, whatever. And
Yeah.
end up not continuing to have their podcast, which is what we call in the industry pod fading. And you just stop. And that happens a lot, which is really unfortunate because I believe everyone has something to say. And if there's people who want to hear it, then you just got to get to those people and let them know, hey, this exists.
That's amazing. So if you were to give, someone just starting out, what kind of advice would you give them? What would be like the first step that they would have to take?
Yeah, so before you even start recording, my recommendation is to always make sure that you know exactly who you're talking to and that you are super duper clear on what it is that your podcast is going to be about and who it's for. So I have a hobby podcast that is all about cults. I grew up in a cult, and so my sister and I, we sit down and we talk about cults from the perspective of those who have grown up in it. So our niche is very particular. Yes, we kind of dive in a little bit to the true crime fandomness that's all over there, but also cult survivors, which is very, very specific. And before we launched, because I use this exact strategy of making sure I'm priming our audience, before we even recorded, I created the Instagrams. I started sharing memes. I started telling people, hey, we have this podcast that's launching this, in this particular month. And we had cult survivors every single week, and we still do, who reach out to us and say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing your story. Oh my goodness, me too. I've been there before. So like, creating that and knowing exactly, okay, who is it that I want to talk to, and kind of doing a bit of an analysis of, all right, what age range are they? What sex are they? That way, when you're having that conversation, especially if you have a solo episode, like solo show, where you're just talking to your computer, you want to make sure that you have that person in your mind and you're talking directly to them. That's the beauty. And I geek out about podcasts, obviously. That's the beauty of podcasting, because you are literally in someone's ear as they're going about their daily stuff. It's not like a Facebook video or a summit or like anything else, because while they're working out, you're in their ear. While they're doing dishes or cleaning up, you're in their ear. While they're taking a shower, because that's literally the only time I have now to listen to like the podcast I want to listen to. Yeah. In the shower. So in the shower, these people are in my ear. And so there's just this deeper connection that happens where you can really become their like virtual BFF, even though they don't know it. So that's what I love about podcasts, but that's why it's so important to make sure you know who you're talking to. And that way they feel that connection. So that would be the first thing. The second thing to do is to invest in some good gear. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to get a Blue Yeti microphone. Like everybody's like, you gotta get the Blue. No. Like I have a client who she bought one that was like $50. her voice comes across better than any of the other clients that have the Yeti one. So really just do a little bit of research, test out a few, and send them back to Amazon, whatever you got to do. And then just figure out which one works best for you. But yeah, invest in some decent gear, and you don't always have to hire someone, but hiring someone doesn't hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for the marketing, you said you start doing marketing about 2 months before your launch. Now, what does that marketing include? Are you just solely talking about the podcast? Like, I just would like to know more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So what we do in particular is definitely the podcast stuff, but also a lot of engagement with the audience that you want to reach, especially if you are just starting out. Like I said, with the hobby podcast that I had, we were starting at 0 because my audience is business owners, consultants. They're not really might not be into cults. Yes, it's a part of my life, but they might not, I wasn't open about it until this year. So most of them didn't even really know. And so I had to grow that audience from the ground up. And so I just started reaching out to the followers, not poaching, because anybody can follow whoever they want, but kind of poaching the followers from other people who were in the same niche as me, those true crime fans, the people who are into cult podcasts, going onto their Facebook pages, going onto their Instagrams, commenting on their stuff, sharing a lot of stuff, using the right hashtags, all that kind of stuff. A lot of it was Instagram marketing, because you can grow your audience pretty quickly on Instagram using those strategies. So we did a lot of that, a lot of sharing memes, so that way it's reshareable content. I just shared a meme last week. I got 17,000 views.
Wow.
It was a spooky Halloween witchy one, and people are into it. It was just and it got so many shares and so many likes, and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's huge.
But yeah, so just being super strategic on that. But then also doing a countdown. So we did a 30-day, 20-day, 10, 9, 8, and then all the way to 1. And then launch day, so you're really priming your audience. You're telling get to know you posts, things like that really get your audience excited, tease certain things that I just had an interview with so-and-so, and it's going to be so good. I can't wait for you guys to listen to it. That's going to get your audience excited about the podcast. But if you launch in 2 weeks, that doesn't give you a lot of time to really do that and be able to push that excitement and have people mark their calendar for when it goes live and all those things. And then what we did is, usually you have your intro, your trailer episode go live first to make sure that Apple Podcasts approves you and all the other things. So we do that about a week before. And we had a select few people on our Instagram where we said, hey, do you want a sneak peek of the podcast? And send us a message. And so they sent us a DM, and there were maybe 10 people, which is not a lot, but still that's 10 people who want to hear us.
Exactly.
And so, I said, what's your preferred podcast listening platform? I sent them the direct link to that platform where they wanted to listen. And then I said, would love, a review or feedback on what you guys think. So that was really great for getting that momentum started before launch. And then when we did launch, we had 250 downloads just within the first 24 hours. It was bananas. Everybody was download.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So what platform do you use to actually record a podcast? Are there free versions for people starting off? Are there better paid programs for those more experienced?
Yeah, so they're all free. Either way that you want to do it, yes. So if you have an Apple product, which I don't like Apple because I just have issues with them, but that's just my own preference. Yeah. And so Apple products and MacBooks, they have a program that comes pre-installed called GarageBand. So you can use that. Now, the Windows version of that you can download, and it's free. It's called Audacity. And I'm techie, so I was able to figure it out in a day. Some people it might take a little longer, but it's pretty easy to use, where you can see, you can see the wave lines, you can cut out the that kind of stuff. So just record right into that program, upload it as an MP3, and then send it to your host. So a lot of people don't know that you can't really host your own podcast, kind of like how we wouldn't really host our own websites. You go to WordPress or Squarespace or wherever else to do that. The same goes for podcasts. So the host that I always love is Buzzsprout, and they're great for beginners and Pat Flynn and Being Boss. So if they're using it and my beginner clients are using it, it's good for everyone.
That's amazing.
You know?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so using them is really great. And then you just upload there and they distribute it to everyone.
Oh,
That's amazing. So what kind of struggles have you gone through with launching your podcast, and kind of what did you do to overcome them?
Yeah, so I would say that the struggle that comes up the most for myself and my clients is mindset. And a lot of people might not realize this, but when you are putting your voice out there and sharing your voice and sharing your story, it can come with a bit of a vulnerability hangover and just a struggle of like, well, like I was talking to someone last night in an interview I was doing, and she said, I sound like a child. My voice sounds like a child, and so I don't want to have a podcast. But when like I can do video because people see that I'm an adult, even though I sound like a child, they can kind of see the face and the voice. And I said, I understand that, but I like to tell this story because it's super important. When I was in corporate, I was in manufacturing and supply chain, and so I worked with a lot of dudes. There was like 5 girls to 100 guys, and I was pretty high up on like the hierarchy of my department, and someone who was equal to me, we had the same boss. I was talking about work. This is what we're doing. This is what's going to happen. It's going to be great. All right, team, let's go. And he looks over at me and he goes, Alesia, you have one of those voices that makes me want to punch you in the face. And my boss was like, you can't say that to people. Like, what is wrong with you? And I was just like, well, that was mean. But when I was younger, I had a soprano voice. I was in the choir. I led worship. I did all those things. And so when I went to college, I got really bad bronchitis because they had a mold issue in the dorm. And I had bronchitis for so long that it altered my voice. And so I went from singing soprano to the baritone altos. And so I already had that like that scaredness in me and that fear of like, well, what if someone says that I sound like a guy? Or what if someone says my voice is too deep to be feminine? Or what if people say these things? And then when he said that, I was just like, well, they do say these things. You know?
gosh.
But then, 5 years later, I launched a podcast and no one's ever said anything about my voice. Nobody cares. They're just like, oh, these cults are really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think the mindset is the number one thing that people struggle with when they're launching and launching anything. You're scared that nobody's going to listen. You're scared that nobody's going to want to listen. And that's why that pre-planning is definitely going to help with that momentum, because you'll see it and you'll be like, okay, I can keep going. I can keep doing this. People are loving this.
I also know that a lot of people have talked to us about not knowing what content to talk about. They'll like, a lot of people say, I know what I can talk about, but I'm worried about down the line. What if I run out of ideas? What do you say to that?
Yes. So there are a few ways that you can make sure you don't run out of content. And this is something I speak about in my Facebook group all the time, because a lot of them are beginners. And so they're like, I could have like 5 things I could say. It's like, okay, so let's break it down. So you've got your main thing of what you are. So if you are an email marketing strategist, right? And then you've got your buckets of main content. So you could talk about email marketing. You could talk about, I'm trying to think like other things that you could talk about as an email marketer. Say there's 3 other things. Like business, mom life, like say that you're talking about all those parts of you. And then you could talk about open and close rates one week. And then the next week you could talk about how you schedule your time as an entrepreneur and as a business owner and as a mom. And the next time you could talk about why you invested in a business coach to grow your business. So it's like, it's still under that email marketing and you as a person, but you got to think of it in buckets of content and then funnel it through. Okay, does this match those buckets? But if you want to talk about your knitting circle, that doesn't really fit into any of those buckets. So that's kind of a filter as well to like, okay, what should I talk about? And then I tell people, if you have an audience, ask your audience. They love to be involved in these decisions. They love to be involved in the questions. Hey, if you have any questions, I'd love to have your questions on. I've seen it where people will have like I can't think of what it's called now, like a voicemail box, right?
Okay.
2020, I should know what this is. But they've got like some type of voicemail box, and or you can have it on your website. There's a few programs that let you do that, where they click on it, they send you a voice memo, and then you can use that for your podcast of like, so-and-so had this question, and then have them put the audio on there and then answer that question. Another way, if you don't have an audience, I tell people, do a quick Google search of your main topics. What are people searching? Go on Pinterest. What are the top things that are being shared and reposted? Like you can find things to talk about if you just look.
It's true. Information's out there. You just have to know where to find it.
Yeah.
If you are, say, for example, you're a big company and you're starting a podcast, would you have a different strategy for a different size of a company and their presence on the internet?
Yeah. So yes and no. I think that the marketing and the timeline of launch is still so important, but their strategy of the guests that they're going to have on their podcast are going to be different, using those connections that they already have. Like I have a client who was just starting out, so she did all of her her friends, the people in her business circle, those kinds of people. Whereas my other client, she has a multi-million-dollar kids box, like subscription box. And so she's talking to scientists at General Mills, CEOs, and I'm like coordinating like between them and the publicist, and that's just like a crazy pants situation in and of itself. But like the people she's having on are completely different level. The planning is a lot more because these people are busy, like really busy. And so like planning all that, and her launch is taking a lot longer because of that, and because it does take time to get those interviews in place and to really be able to book them and coordinate all that stuff. So yeah, but then I'm also working with her marketing team on, all right, how are we prepping her audience for this? How are we prepping them for that? And how are we being super strategic with what everything looks like? So yeah.
Do you find that podcasts where they do have a guest speaker on do better sometimes?
Yes, usually. And the reason is because you are borrowing that person and their audience in a way.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to make sure that if you do have a podcast, that if you want to have it as a solo show, you already have an audience growing in that way. But if you don't, then it's really important to either get on other people's podcasts or to have people on your podcast. And that's not to say that you only have to do it one way. I've seen people do a hybrid of different variations of types of podcasts. You got the solo, the interviewer, and where they only do interviews, which I never recommend if you're a business owner, because you should be priming your audience to buy from you and to talk about your expertise and how you work with your clients. So always filter in your own. But the other one is to have a co-host, kind of like what you ladies do, and really just like bouncing off of each other. And then the last one's a hybrid. And so I like to kind of have the combination of the three. So it's got your co-host, but then they come in maybe once a month or something like that. And they come in like regularly. They're your regular. They always are in there. And then you've got those interviews scattered out and throughout. And then you've got those solo episodes that are going to really drive home what your expertise is. And that way you can generate leads through your podcast.
That's awesome. And how often would you say somebody should be releasing a podcast for it to be successful?
You can release one every week. I always recommend starting with a once a week. I've seen people do 3 times a week. That is a lot of work, especially if you want a high quality audio experience for your listeners. If that isn't really a priority, which you will prioritize at the beginning. Okay, what exactly do you want to get out of this? What kind of experience do you want your listeners to have? Then you don't have to really worry about that so much. If you're confident in what you're going to say, who you're going to talk to, all that stuff, then 3 a week is not terrible. You got to also think of like coordinating guests and all that stuff too that goes into having so many. So I always recommend once a week, but that's not to say that other ones aren't successful doing once a month or once every other week. I know there's a podcast that's all about chronic diseases and like debilitating diseases, and they do every other week because they are hosts that have those. And so their audience understands, like, I can't show up for you guys every week because I might be laid out in bed for a week. And so they found that that works really well, and they're super successful with it. And then the storytelling podcast, so there's one, I can't think of what it's called, but it's a storytelling one. It's in the true crime category, and they show up once a month, but it is like decked out to the nines. It's about 2 hours long. There's music throughout. There's like bits of other audio from other people in there. So they really go like next level with theirs, and it's a storytelling one. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And what would you say that you wish you would have known just starting out? Like, is there anything that you wish you would have done yourself?
I think that my first podcast that I launched, which has since pod faded, it was about e-commerce, but I don't do e-commerce anymore. But since I was in manufacturing, I saw that there was a need for product businesses to have some type of podcast that they could listen to. And so I wanted to be able to have that for them. I still have it up because I get downloads every week. People still like it. They still listen to it. So I just leave it there. Until people stop listening, it's there. And so when I first started that, I spent so much time overthinking like, well, am I talking about the right things? Does my audience even care about this stuff? And in the last year and a half, I've learned, like, no, you just keep going. You keep going. You can't stop. You got to keep going. And that's what creates that momentum. And that's what creates that success that people want. Like, really, so there's a few different programs, right? Hosts that you can use, as we talked about before. Libsyn is one of them, and theirs is a little more higher tech. Like, their tech is a little different, and so it's a little more confusing for beginners, but a lot of people use them. But they are like, they house a lot of the bigger podcasts, like the really crazy top charts for months and months and months at a time. Those are on there. And so you're in the top 50% if you get 360 downloads for one episode in the first 30 days. Now, Buzzsprout, their stats are a little different because they have a lot of smaller podcasts, but they also have Pat Flynn and Being Boss. So there's like outliers, but there's a lot of people who are just like podcasting for fun or podcasting for their business, and they don't need millions of downloads or thousands of downloads. They just need to reach those raving fans who listen every single week. And so for them, they just came out with some stats yesterday that said, if you have 300 downloads in the last 30 days total, you are already in the top 50%. Like, wow, that's total. Like, yeah. So like, for their platform. So I showed that to my client because we had a meeting yesterday for the end of the month, and she was like, yes, I am there. So it's like, it's really great, like really looking at those stats and seeing that, like, the numbers are arbitrary in a way because the algorithms are so new, and Apple Podcasts doesn't know what they're doing half the time. So it's like, there's issues with that and stuff. So but a lot of people are jumping on these podcasts. People are listening to them more. And yeah, so I think that I would have wished that I would have kept going. Not so much with the podcast in particular, because it wasn't in alignment anymore, but just like knowing that you can keep going and it's okay. And people are going to listen, and knowing that when I started, like, that even after a year of not podcasting, people are still downloading your podcast. And then I think I would have wished that I knew that the downloads are arbitrary, that it's not about having thousands of fans. It's about having those 100 raving fans who will not stop talking about you. And those are the people you want. And those are the people that you want to talk to.
That's amazing. That's so inspiring.
Thanks.
Well, we also know you do have a free gift to offer the viewers. So can you tell us more about what your free gift is?
Yeah, so I am a full service podcast manager. I manage people's podcasts. And so I deal with a lot of people who want to launch, but maybe can't afford, my services to really help them. And so I have a podcast launch training that you guys can download. And there's a training in there. There's a checklist on exactly what kind of things you'll need, from microphones to hosts. And then I've got some, hey, these are my favorites in there. And then I also have like some bonuses in there. I'm about to put the intro outro framework in there. So that'll give you really clearly like, okay, how do you create that intro? How do you create that outro? So you have consistency and it sounds good and you're hitting those main points that need to be in that intro and outro. So yep.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find you as well?
Yeah, so alesiagalati.com. That's where I house all my information. But I really like hanging out on Instagram at alesia.galati. And so, yeah, I'm into reels right now. So,
yeah.
A lot of reels. And, I'm on stories almost every day, I would say. So
that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you
yes.
so much.
And we'll have everything linked so all of our viewers can easily find your information. So thank you so much for meeting with us, Alesia. I know that that's going to be extremely helpful information for many, many people. And we hope we can connect again soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.